The Ultimatum mode for Spire of the Watcher was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I would still like to put out a very short guide on some builds and weapons and just some advice that I think will allow you to speed run your way through this place. That being said, this video does assume you know how to do the base version of Spire of the Watcher. I am not going to be re-explaining mechanics in this video. Eternity mode is essentially the base version of the dungeon, so I would run that first to get a refresher, or the brand new Explorer mode, which I would like to talk about in a future video. One thing to know here is that a lot of sections now have revive tokens and revive timers, so try to stick together, or at the very least, don't die. You can, however, get someone to the next section of the dungeon, and that should revive any dead people or kill any sort of token timers. Ultimatum mode has brought a couple of differences. Number one is the inclusion of more things in each encounter, although none of them are very difficult to deal with if you understand the base encounter. Number two is that everything hits much harder, but it didn't feel contest difficulty, even if it is actually scaled that way. The opening encounter, for example, is the exact same up until you get all of the wires connected. After that, you're going to have a big boss Hydra spawn in, but as soon as you kill it, the fight is over. I would bring burst damage supers for this guy in addition to burst damage weapons, although having one person with some range to deal with the Cyclops is a good idea because they can and will one-shot you if they get a hit in. In terms of the builds that my team brought in, we didn't need to create anything very special for this place at all. I was on a Bolt Charge Spect Titan with Storm's Keep and Thunderlord, we had a Consecration Prismatic Titan doing their thing, and we had a Prismatic Warlock using a Song of Flame Transcendence Melee Snap combination build. And I think I have videos on all of these builds on the channel, at least the Titan ones. Hunters, I imagine a very basic Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun setup is going to be 100% fine here. Maybe something with Gathering Storm if you want to go Arc. Point is, if you've been playing recently, you're probably familiar with some kind of a top tier build for the episode. Arc Titan with Storm's Keep, Arc Warlock with Ionic Sentry, to name a couple. Again, Hunters, your Arc setup has historically been great, although the first true boss and the final encounter do not utilize much build crafting at all, and instead rely on weaponry. The first collectible is before you go up the big elevator in the big open room seen here. The next encounter is also the same, but one, you now have a timer, so you need to move pretty quickly, and two, the elevators are now blocked off only to be opened after the defeat of a special enemy or enemies that spawn once all of the wires are connected. The main factor here is just, do you remember the positions of all the nodes? And if you do, you're going to fly through this place. I would continue to bring burst supers and some medium range weaponry to deal with these farther away enemies. Linear fusions are probably good, Xenophage probably somewhat good, maybe rockets as well. I know my team was using Choir of One, that thing is still very good as well. Once at the top, a big Minotaur boss is going to spawn at the end with more health than the enemies that preceded it. So again, just burst it down with some supers. This really should not be that big of a deal. The Harpy boss has gotten one small change, which will barely affect how you do the fight. Each node has a shape above it, and there is a shape sequence in the middle of the arena that will spawn in when you start the fight. You read this top to bottom, and you have to activate the corresponding wire line in that order. However, this only applies for the final node in a line. So what you can do to speed up the process is connect every line on all four sides to right up before you get to the last one, and then just hit the final nodes in the correct order. So everyone gets Arctrician, and then you spread out, and you connect a bunch of the dots, you figure out where the final node is of like the last shape, and then you do the other three first, and then you regroup at the last one. There's no stress about connecting full chains individually and having to go around the whole map. For boss damage, it is difficult to suggest anything other than Queenbreaker with the Catalyst with Particle Reconstruction. It is absolutely cooking in this episode. I see no reason to stray from this path. If you're having trouble hitting crits, you can totally throw in a Divinity into the group. That is fine. It is very possible to two-phase this boss with some good shooting. Don't forget about swapping to Arc Surges. Not Swap is active for this dungeon, where switching an exotic will reset your ability energy, so as long as you're not wearing exotic boots, you're good to switch. If you are wearing exotic boots, I'm mainly looking at you like Geomag Warlocks, you can just cram in a couple of surges and maybe a scav mod or recuperation if you are worried about dying, and just roll with the surges the whole time. The next section introduces a mechanic adjustment. Normally, all of these wire nodes are open to shoot whatever order you want. On Ultimatum, only one is open, and shooting it will trigger the next one to open. If you're too slow, all of them close and you need to start over. The second collectible is right before the big drop down to the boss, so like don't plummet all the way to the floor just yet. Make sure to scoop this. For the final boss, it is probably best practice to repeat the queenbreaker setup, but you may want divinity this time because the boss crit is more difficult to hit. My team used Thunderlord just because we wanted to. That resulted in a very manageable 3-phase. We also utilized Storm's Keep again. Everyone just sat behind my barricade for free lightning strikes, and we used a Well of Radiance to keep things pretty safe since the boss hits incredibly hard, and for some Radiant for the team. Otherwise, strong primaries, strong specials are good here, rocket sidearms, special GLs, fusion rifles like my Techian Force from Last Wish was basically two-shotting the Minotaurs, and it's a pretty nice backup in case you run out of power ammo during the boss. You could also use rockets on the boss, but I feel like you might run into some ammo problems where you need to farm for a little while if you're not running any kind of like ammo restoration support setup. So not only do you have to do the nodes one at a time, not only do they close if you're too slow, I'm talking about the ones in the middle, but you also have to deal with the shape sequence again from the second boss. Fortunately, if you get one shape on a left side wire and one on a right side, this is really easy to manage because you can just do the same thing that we talked about in the Harpy encounter. You get both of them to the end of the line, and then you just finish them in the correct order. If you get both on the same side, doing this is also fine, you just need to actually pay attention a little bit more. The fight is the same otherwise, everything just hits much harder. This is also the hardest gold tier completion of the dungeon, where you need to really limit your deaths. That's how you get a gold tier completion. Fortunately, if you have a lot of deaths pretty early, you can just force a wipe and restart. You do not need to get all of the gold tier completions in a single run. You will eventually want all gold encounter completions for the triumphs, and they're not really that too hard to get, so I would chase them down. In terms of the weapons that drop from this place, I do have a full video if you want a more significant breakdown, but I think the main things to watch for are Wilder Flight with Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch, or some kind of slide shot and disorienting grenade type play, and then you have Terminus Horizon probably opting for either a more traditional slaying setup in Reconstruction and Killing Tally, or going into the more arc side of things with Jolting Feedback. That is your short and sweet guide to Ultimatum mode Spire. Again, it is really not that bad, and once you get all of your gold completions, which you, again, do not need to do in a single run, you will have that checked off of the list. I assume the best way to grind weapons would be to just checkpoint farm whatever the easiest loot dropping encounter is, which probably is the opening encounter, I think. Feel free to leave your own advice in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.